So welcome to Archers County, our 5th day of mission. Just to let you know that since our last talk on Tuesday evening, and our Thursday, aren't we? Yesterday we had a very lovely, quiet but poignant service of prayer and readings in the morning. A lovely mass with Bishop Christopher, of course, in the evening. And this afternoon, a wonderful, wonderful time, which we set aside for our the more senior of our citizens. Lovely service followed by a Queen tea. So we're feeling very joyful. Thank you so much for coming. What I'd like to do is start off this by us all reading our mission prayer, which you should find somewhere in your pews. Heavenly Father, giver of all good gifts, you have given us Jesus, your Son, who revealed the depth of your love for us. Fill our hearts with love for you. Pour out your Spirit anew on our parish community. May you abundantly bless our mission week and the preparations we put into it. Let it be a time of refreshment, renewal and joy. May we be drawn ever closer into the friendship of Jesus, and grow together as a community, united in love and friendship. We make our prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. I'm going to hand you over to Francie.
Thank you. Jillian Wilce is a wife, a mother, a teacher, a catechist, and a supporter for marriage and family life at the Vicariate in the Diocese of Plymouth. Some of you may know Jillian. I've known her for quite some time, and Jillian was instrumental in organising the celebration of marriage services held at Buckfast Abbey and Exeter Cathedral. I was very honoured to be invited to this service one year with my family, which coincided with my silver wedding anniversary, and it was a beautiful event, the celebration of marriage and family. An engaging and thought-provoking speaker, Jillian has spoken on many occasions, both in the diocese and beyond, and we are very honoured to have her with us this evening. So I'm therefore very happy to introduce Jillian.
Having spent the day with several, probably about 120 girls in this heat, it's lovely to come and spend the evening with you and be refreshed with you. Hello. As you know, my name's Jillian, and I ended up working with the Vicariate for Formation through the Celebrated Family Fund, which came out of the Listening 2004 project that you might have heard of 11 years ago. It seems like such a short time ago in my head, but it is quite a long time ago. And I've been working within the diocese to a greater or lesser extent, as Francine said, supporting marriage and family life. So, I'm going to tell you a story first of all. Last year, at the very last week in July, glutton for punishment that I was, I went to Buckfast Abbey with a group of 13, 16 and 17-year-olds. This was part of the diocesan catechetical camps. I don't know if you have anybody from your parish that goes to them. And I was in charge of the big ones. And one day we were supposed to be listening. It was all about seeing, listening and hearing, and we were supposed to be hearing and then going out to maybe proclaim the gospel. And this one particular day was all about listening. And I gave them a 2p coin with, which had a date on it. And the date was they had to go and think about the year, that particular year, so let's say it was 1995, and think about what was going on in their faith journey that particular year. How was their faith life in that particular year? Now, I picked up a 1992 coin and realised most of them weren't born there, and then I felt very old. But anyway, so I sent them off and asked them to tell me about something about their faith life in that particular year. How was their faith life? And that they came back and sort of spoke about sort of various things that happened to them that year. And then they started telling me, well, they told me about their faith journey up until that point. And they told me about the day they were baptised. Well, what they were told about the day they were baptised. And they told me who their godparents were, and they told me how old they probably were, and they really were just passing on memories. But they didn't tell me about the day that they became an elder brother or sister. They hadn't told me about the time when, and I knew for some of them this was the case, where their parent had become unwell and they were in the role of carer. So they told me about this life-changing moment of baptism, where they were called to sort of die to themselves and become something to another. But they didn't tell me about the very ordinary moments of baptism. They told me about their first confession, how embarrassing it was, and they were so embarrassed about it. And what the priest had sometimes said to them, or what they hadn't told the priest, and sometimes they told me about how they'd made up things because they couldn't think of anything to say to the priest. And then they had to go back the next week and say sorry for having told a lie. But they didn't tell me about the times when they'd made up maybe with a sibling. They didn't tell me about the times of forgiveness that had happened along the way in their daily lives. They told me about their first Holy Communion and the white dresses and the sashes and the blue ties and the first communion breakfast and how funny the wine tasted, how funny the blood tasted. But they hadn't told me about the moments of communion that they'd experienced maybe with their family around the table, where they told their story and had said their sorries and had been readmitted, if you like, back into the family community. They hadn't told me about those deep moments of communion that they sometimes had experienced within nature. And they didn't tell me about those moments of communion that they maybe experienced with other people. And I told them about Patrick. Patrick Purnell is a Jesuit, and he wrote a book called Our Faith Story. And something he wrote has resonated with me for years, actually. He said that his religious life, he felt, was a bit like a bubble up here somewhere, that he sort of had to make an effort to enter into it. And it was something that he had to sort of aspire to be in. And of course he hadn't realised that actually God comes to us disguised as life. And these young people at Buckfast were in exactly the same position. They were seeing their faith life as something very precious and up here and a little bit unobtainable, not something where actually the Lord is here. I understand that's your little slogan this week, your tagline. They weren't realising that the Lord was with them in the very ordinary moments. They hadn't realised what the bishops have been saying to us since 2004, that actually their homes and their daily lives are a holy place. And this is what the bishops were telling us back in 2004 to 2008. They were telling us that, when you do all those chores, when you're looking after somebody else, maybe it's an older relative, or maybe it's a grown-up child, or maybe it's just somebody that lives up the lane. When you're up in the night to that sick child for the 3rd, 4th, 5th, sometimes 6th, 7th time, and when you stood on the rugby pitch on a Friday night often normally, saying, "Oh, come on, Greg," my son loves rugby, you'll hear about him in a minute. And I'd actually, at the end of the week, I'd much rather be at home, maybe with a glass of wine, but I'm there going, "Come on, Greg." When we're doing yet another load of laundry, when we listen to the advice of our elders, and when we share our advice sometimes and recognise that maybe sometimes those who are younger than us can be wiser, when we give help, when actually we could do with some help ourselves, when we give up and make all of these sacrifices. There's one thing children wear out faster than shoes as parents. But when we give up all of these sort of selfish things that we want to do for our families, we're on holy ground. And so the bishops tell us that our home is a holy place. Now there's 2 lots of these, second and third lot of these, which are all from the Home is a Holy Place pack, if you want to have another look at it. Because in that pack it tells us that God is present in our homes where we love one another. It also tells us that when we're looking after our environment, taking out the rubbish, recycling, making the most of our environment, when we stand and ponder the small things in life, when we look after our pets and things like that, when we stand in awe and wonder at the miraculous, mystical things in life. In fact, we are in a holy place. We're standing on holy ground because God's presence graces all of creation. When we stand in awe and wonder, that's part of the Spirit of God in us. It also goes on to tell us that when we're a lifeline to those in need, when we look after those who are hurting, be they little or be they big, when we stick together through thick and thin and find an opportunity to smile about things. When we look after the lonely, and sometimes they're little and sometimes they're big. And when sometimes we put up with our own loneliness, possibly because our vocation has taken us to our school or our place of work, and we've never actually had time to get married and have a family, or maybe the marriage has broken up, or a spouse has died, and I'd really quite like that person over there, but the children aren't ready yet, and so I'll just stand back a bit. When we do those things, when we tolerate our own loneliness, then home is a holy place, because the relationships there mirror God's relationship with us. So, this is what the bishops are telling us. Good news indeed. They're telling us that often when we think ourselves as clay in the potter's hand, sometimes that clay feels a little bit dried up, and maybe you're thinking you're unlikely clay, but actually we're like this as clay in the potter's hands. And family life, in a sense, is a bit like this, a bit rough around the edges, a bit grey, a bit colourless, but actually, when looked at carefully, contains a pearl of great price. So yes, our homes and all the ordinary stuff that goes on inside them are sacred, are holy. But maybe we don't have the right language to start talking about them. Maybe we're thinking of words like pious or religious. And maybe we just don't realise that the small things that we faithfully do for one another are a bit like mosaics being laid on the floor of the kingdom. And so, when we do all of these things, and not just the celebrating at Mass, when we do all of those things, including the celebrating, then in fact, we are living and expressing our faith. So, I do this talk, or have done this talk, with many, many parents, and often we're sort of sat in a group of about 10 or 12 of us, and we're having coffee and we sort of talk about things, and they don't realise that. They don't realise that actually some of those little things that they do are an expression of their faith. And so I show them this little film, and I set them homework. I'm not going to set you homework, although I might, you never know. Depends how good you are. Okay, so this is a little film. Have a little look.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 13.
Did you get it right?
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Have a look, same piece of film. Here he is. It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. It's actually an advert for cyclists looking out for cyclists. But we often, as family, miss the holy moments of our lives because we have wrapped them up in something that's to do with ritual, let's say. And we forget that actually some of the very ordinary stuff is an expression of our faith life. And I send parents home and saying, you've got to go home now and spot it. Spot it in your children, spot it in your husbands and your wives, spot it in the people around you. Do you fancy that homework? Maybe I said it for you. Detention for those people who don't hand it in. Sorry, I tell I'm a teacher, can't you? So, we need to be making ourselves sensitised to this notion that actually holiness is all around us if we but look, both in our homes and in our churches and outside of our churches. So, what are we going to do to try and maybe connect that faith life, that holiness, and the stuff of the ordinary stuff, if you like? Now, probably about 2010, I was asked to do a piece of study, and the study was based again to one of the Bishops' Conference's initiatives called Passing on the Faith. And we were trying to look at successful ways of passing on the faith, and I had to write an essay. I'm a mathematician, I don't write essays, but anyway, I persevered and I tried. So, what I did is I first of all found this, and I put this on the front of my essay. This is a picture from the London Underground. You might recognise it, but the words are different. It's done by a lady called Barbara Kruger, and she said that what was happening here, this is supposed to be Oxford Street, and there the word is perfection. And apparently she had a sense of striving for perfection at Oxford Street. We might think differently about that. But what I loved about this, and I've used it with parents working with talking about their own faith journeys, is sometimes we have to pass through doubt to get to joy. And where is the devotion in the journey towards compassion? And how does irony or fame or pride figure in our journey to belief? And where does laughter fit in? So I often give people a copy of that tube map, but I think I might have run out, but I'll see if I've got some in my bag. But just talking about faith journeys, and we often started with actually what were our aspirations for our children's faith. And we, as a group of parents, we sat down and said, well, okay, what are our priorities here? And we came up with about 8 or 9 different statements, and they're going to come up on the board here. But I've got copies of them for you. So, would you mind? You probably need to sort of talk to your friend here, or if they're not very friendly, talk to the person behind you. But these statements, and they're coming up, so you're going to have them in front of you, are: I would like to see my child attend Mass regularly. They would be involved in parish ministry, possibly serve on the altar, or maybe sing in the choir. They would have an understanding of the elements of the liturgy. So that was one of our aspirations. A second of their aspirations was, I would like my child to have a sense of the divine, recognise beauty in creation and see God in their everyday encounters. We also had, I would like my child to know that they are loved by God. I would like my child to have a personal relationship with Jesus and have a sense of the Spirit within their lives. Also, we had, I would like my child to understand what makes them Catholic. I would like them to be familiar with the Catechism and have a sense of Catholic identity. They would know some of the teaching of the Catholic Church and would aspire to adhere to it. We also had, I would like my child to talk about faith matters freely and feel they can ask questions openly and safely. Another one, I would like my child to have respect for others and to understand they are part of a bigger picture. I would hope they would respond with justice and compassion to the needs of others. I'd be delighted if they were involved in some sort of charity work. Another one, I would like my child to feel part of a worshipping community, welcomed at Mass on Sunday. I would hope that those they meet with at Mass feel like a second family. And finally, I would like my child to pray regularly, read and engage with Scripture, and find a forum in which they might share faith and pray with their peers. They're pretty good aspirations, aren't they? I was really delighted with them when they came in with all of those, because I'm thinking all of them had something in them which I really enjoyed. Now, what we then did is we tried to prioritise them. And this is the point, we didn't fall out, and we definitely didn't come to blows, but we did differ. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, I've spoken for long enough, I need a sip of water. I'm going to ask you to chat with each other and say, well, do you know, if I had to pick my top 2 or my top 3, what might they be? And actually, if I had to put anything at the bottom of the pile, what might be at the bottom of the pile? Are there 2 or 3 that you might put towards the bottom of the pile? So, what are your favourites, to use maybe not the right word, but what are your priorities? And this is personal. So what are your priorities? What's your top 2 or 3? And what are your bottom 2 or 3? So can I give you about 5 minutes to have a little talk and read through and maybe read them again and talk to people and come up with your top 2, top 3 and bottom 2, bottom 3. Back.
It's like underlying a personal relationship with Jesus. I look up this where the just don't repent, these are full stop, not short. I take the sentence from each.
So I've got another half an hour because it was 2:45 p.m. If you say go to the finance, give them 5 minutes to get better. We don't care. So what are your thoughts? So what are your thoughts? Anybody want to offer their top tips, their top 2 or 3?
Yes. I would like...
You go first.
I'll lie down. I was going to say that they're all inputs. There's virtually no outputs.
Oh, okay.
And I mix too. I would like my child to have a personal, loving relationship with Jesus. And I would hope they would respond in love and justice and compassion to the needs of others.
So that second one being an output.
And the first one, it's a relationship with Jesus, because we weren't told to go to Mass on Sunday, we were told to love me and love one another. And that's where we have to get to. Whether you go to Mass or another church, or you're good at Scripture, bad at Scripture, or how you do that, you're working towards the output. And if we don't get the output, we haven't succeeded.
Indeed. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I start with my bottom one?
If you like. Go ahead, you're in charge. It's your mission week.
I don't want to pigeonhole my children at all. I want them to understand or to have a relationship with Jesus, but I don't want them to tie them to Catholicism or the Mass. I don't mind if they end up as Buddhists. If that's what floats their boat, then that's fine with me. If they're happy, if they feel loved, if they feel safe, that's what I want for my children.
So which did you pick at the bottom then? You said you were going to pick your
The bottom was, I would like my child to understand what makes them a Catholic. I would like to be familiar with the catechism, etc.
Anybody else want to offer? Either tops or bottoms, we don't mind.
It's really hard to determine what you would want, actually for yourself rather than your child, isn't it? You know, the sense of, you know, it would be lovely if they were, you know, perfect children doing perfect things.
And doing all those
based on my standards, exactly. And it's really hard to pick. We were discussing which one would be top or bottom, but we couldn't take ourselves out of it. So it's really hard to determine. I mean, so, you know, I would love my child to know that they are loved by God, but for me, you know, it's really hard to say for them and not for me. So we were challenged by that, weren't we? So we couldn't really come up with a top or bottom.
To be fair, these are aspirations that parents have for their children.
Yeah,
so I think
yeah.
you would have to be selfish.
You would, yeah.
You would have to be
it's-
selfish.
yeah.
Okay.
So we were.
I think what surprises me is that that the, you know, all the Catholic bit, the sort of Mass regularly, which I would have thought, you know, intuitively, that's what I would want for my child. Those are sort of lower down the list, you know, the ones that they are loved by God, they have, you know, that they're able to pray, that they, you know, Scripture, those are higher up, which surprises me, because I would have thought, you know, obviously, going to Mass regularly, all the particular Catholic ones are very dear to me, and I'm just surprised that those actually in this meeting are much lower down, which surprises me. Yes.
And that you're saying for your choice that they were lower down on your list of the
Yes.
Catholic ones.
Yes, which, you know, really surprised me. Yes.
Yes.
My top one would be, I would like my child to have a sense of the divine. The reason being, everything flows from that. So that's like the core, so everything flows from that. My bottom would be, I would like my child to understand what makes them Catholic. Although that is important, that in many ways is generates exclusivity, as opposed to being all-encompassing for Christian faiths.
Okay. I've got 2 pencils in my hand. If you've got an aspiration or something that you'd like to write, feel free and jot it down on the back and give it back to me, and I'll add it to the list. So, because this is not exhaustive at all, but it was just some that these particular parents came up with. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my family, because I started to look at, sort of in a sense, how have I successfully passed on faith to my children? Okay, so here's a little family album here for you. This is Hannah. Hannah is 23 now, and she works for Headway in Exeter. That's the Brain Injury Trust. She went to Haythrop in London and studied some philosophy, and She very much is engaged with Mass. She goes to Lourdes. She went to World Youth Day. She's hoping to go again next year. She went to Teze for 10 days. And I sort of think, did I pass on faith? Oh, yes, tick. VG. This is Holly. This one here. She hates me showing this picture, but it tells me to say something about her. This is Holly doing 10 tours. You must know about 10 tours, being in the second Lloyd. And this is her coming in from 10 tours. And we went to Celebrate, and this conversation flowed out of Celebrate, the big conference at Christmas in Alfrecombe. You might be aware of it. Catholic conference, family orientated. And we came home from that, and in the car on the way home, she said, Mum, I don't believe in God. And I said, oh, okay, Holly, okay, tell me about it then. Why is that? And should I believe in beauty? She said, when I was on the moor doing the 10 tours, she said, you'd get up in the morning and you'd be walking at dawn, and it was just beautiful. And we'd get so tired and we'd burst into tears, and somebody would make us laugh, and that was just beautiful. What I haven't told you is that Holly, I had to sort of bribe Holly to go to Mass. Holly loves surf lifesaving, and surf lifesaving was on a Sunday morning. So she had to go to early Mass in Sholden and then go to surf lifesaving. And she couldn't go to surf lifesaving unless she went to early morning Mass. So she should get up and go to early morning Mass and go to surf lifesaving. And she says, the sea, Mum, is just beautiful. I love it. And sometimes when you hear music and it just completely overwhelms you, that's beautiful and that's wonderful as well. And she talks in these sorts of terms about beauty. Now, Holly is in her final year at York University, and she's got a job in London next year at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital as a nurse. We're thrilled about that. She's just got a dissertation back, so it's all going well. Have I passed on faith to Holly? Somebody told me she's very Augustinian. I'll let you answer that question, have I passed on faith to Holly? Because all of a sudden it wasn't a black and white, grey tick VG moment. Interestingly, she phoned me not long ago, and her roommate was having difficulties. And Holly doesn't go to Mass, by the way. Now she hasn't got to go to surf lifesaving, doesn't go to Mass, now she's in York. But she phoned me not long ago, and her roommate was having difficulties and tried to commit suicide twice. And I was trying to advise her to tell her friend to get some fashion advice, and Holly, when we put the phone down, she said, Mum, will you pray for me and Charlotte? And I said, yeah, Holly, of course I will. I'll pray for you and Charlotte. That's Holly. This is Florence. Florence is now 19. She would go to Mass because actually there was a little girl in our parish called Ella, and Ella has all sorts of different difficult needs, and Florence would go in and sit with Ella and make sure Ella was entertained and read through the book, and now that Flossie's away from home, she doesn't go to Mass. However, she comes home and she takes Ella out for the day when she's home from university. She's studying psychology and wants to become a counsellor. And have I passed on faith to Flossie? When she came home from Celebrate, quite interestingly, she said, I think Jesus is a bit overrated, really, Mum. And I said, really? She said, well, he tells you to do this, he tells you to do this, and it's all about him. And I thought, oh, okay, well, it could be put across in that way. I can see where you're coming from. But have I passed on faith to Flossie? She says that when she has her own children, she's going to take them to church, although she won't go herself now, although she will be on the weekend because she was home for the first weekend. And she said when she had children, she'd take them to church. She wants them to feel part of a community. So she likes the community bit, that statement about the community. This is Greg. Greg is probably almost as tall as this board now. He looks a bit younger, doesn't he? He's 13 now. He would always go to Mass on a Sunday because why do 6-year-olds go to Mass on a Sunday? See their buddies and biscuits following Mass. And Mum isn't allowed to, Mum doesn't allowed to shout at him to say, don't eat those biscuits, because I'm in Mass and I'm being on my best behaviour. But Greg now plays rugby. Bless him, he plays rugby for Devon. It's really nice. He's done really well. And rugby, of course, is Sunday morning. So we have a bit of a battle. Are we going to get you there? Okay, we might have to go on Saturday night. He doesn't really want to go. Have I passed on faith to Greg? Somebody was punching somebody in the changing room in school the other day. He stepped in, took the bully away, because he's quite big now. Have I passed on faith to Greg? To me? Okay. So I looked at my own family and I was looking at had I passed on faith to them. And I realised I was Mrs. Grumpy. Because I had done this. In judging my children's faith, I had used the statement, I would like to see my child attend Mass regularly, they would be involved in parish ministry, possibly serve on the altar, choir, blah, 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 all of that sort of stuff. Understand the liturgy. And I realised this one, not that it's bad, it's wonderful, but it was at the bottom of my priority list, a bit like yourself. And yet I was using that statement to judge whether I had passed on faith. That's why I'm tentative in saying, have I passed on faith? Because actually, I think it will come to fruition. So, the aspirations. It's not black and white. It's multicoloured. And we maybe need to be surprised by our own choices and think again about what our aspirations are. When we look, mission is all about an encounter with Jesus. And when we fix our eyes on him, he also sort of informs what it is to have faith. Because, if anybody knows about faith, he should, Jesus should. If he sees faith and comments on it, then that should be pretty safe there. This is a picture from Wintershall. It was on last weekend. I don't know if any of you have ever been, but I was there last weekend. Fabulous. If you ever want to introduce somebody to the person of Jesus, and they don't know much about church or Jesus or anything like that, but they quite like a day sitting in the sunshine, take them to Wintershall. The Life of Christ. They do a 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. play in the last week in June, every day. From the Annunciation through to the Ascension. Fabulous. Take a hanky. It's Easter and Christmas all rolled into one, in the other order, of course. Go and see. Anyway, sorry, off the beaten track there, but it's just so fresh in my mind from last weekend. When we look and see when Jesus comments on faith, so I'm going to take you through a few of the scripture passages in which Jesus comments on people's faith. Because it's fascinating when we do. Okay. You heard today about the paralysed man being dropped through the roof. That was our reading today. And Jesus comments on their faith. That's what the scripture tells us. Jesus comments on their faith. Not his faith, their faith. These four, and him probably, their faith. He also comments on the centurion's faith in superlative terms. He says, not in all Judea have I seen such faith as this. And of course we repeat the centurion's words every time we have communion. And Jesus commented on his faith. The lady who comes and just weeps at his feet says nothing, but weeps at his feet. And Jesus comments on her faith. The woman who's been bleeding for 12 years and just dares to touch his hem. Jesus comments on her faith. The Syrophoenician woman, who's not of Jesus' kind, he says it. He says, I haven't come for you, I've come for the Jewish people. And she sort of nags him and says, but even the dogs will eat the crumbs from the table. Please heal my daughter. And of course, Jesus does. And he comments on her faith. So I'm looking at all of these different scripture passages where Jesus comments on faith. And I'm sort of wondering, what are the domestic parallels? What are the sort of home parallels? Now, one group of parents I was working with, a lady arrived, and we were starting to talk about our aspirations for faith, and this was before, we were still sort of exploring at this stage. And she came in, and she was in tears after a short while, and she said, I have 4 children, and none of them will go to Mass. And that really disappoints me, really upsets me. And so after we'd started exploring, we looked through these particular bits of scripture. I did say to her, could she imagine any one of her 4 children up here? And she started to cry again. She said, yes, every single one of them, in a moment, in a heartbeat, would be there. But this time there were tears of relief, not tears of disappointment. When we adhere to authority beyond ourselves and recognise authority beyond ourselves and understand the wisdom and teaching understand and try to adhere to the wisdom and teaching of our church, we are in that position of knowing actually, Lord, you know best. When our children, and sometimes it's our spouse or sometimes it's another family relative, come, and I often find this with the children, they'll come and, they've had a row, but they'll come and they'll just put their arm around me, have a little cry, don't say anything, but they've come seeking forgiveness. And there are maybe other parallels in our lives where we come seeking forgiveness. And Jesus comments on her faith, and I'm wondering if he's commenting on ours as well. This was an act really of, it's possibly akin to maybe sending in somebody with Ebola into a neonatal ward. It was quite, we shouldn't be doing that. This was the culture of the time, would have seen this woman bleeding, coming to a teacher and touching him would have been complete no-no. And I'm just wondering, when do we break through cultural barriers for justice, maybe for healing? And when does that happen within our community lives or maybe in our family lives as well? And when do we nag for justice? The Syrophoenician lady nagged Jesus. I like to think he changed his mind in some way, but I don't think he did. I think it was to demonstrate something. But when do we nag for the sake of justice? Because all of these moments are when Jesus will be going like, that's a moment of faith, Well, I like to imagine it anyway. So, passing on the faith, all these moments of faith. At no point did Jesus say, and make sure I see you in the synagogue, to these people. I'm not saying that we shouldn't encourage our families and our children to come to Mass, because as you've been doing Proclaim, haven't you? You've been doing the run-up runs? Okay. In the very first Proclaim preamble evening, you hear about a man who comes back to church for the first time after several years, and he just is moved by the beauty of it, and that reignites his faith. There's a place for it all, that's what I'm trying to say. Now, so faith is this multicoloured thing. It takes lots of different forms and shapes and colour, if you like. It's not. I know my daughter came home with the first time after we had the Latin translation, and she said the wrong thing. And people ran around, oh, tell she's not been at Mass for a while. She was home at Christmas. Did you just say "and also with you"? That says English, okay, she can't quite see it. Because she realised that she got it wrong, and she felt a bit judged by it, because she'd not been to Mass for probably about 5 months. But this was Holly, the nurse, the one that likes beauty. So, multicoloured faith. Because Jesus said, follow me. He said, follow me more often than he ever said, worship me. In fact, Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan priest, Texan, he says, Jesus never said, worship me. He said, follow me. And all those people that we heard about, the 4 friends dropping the paralysed man through the roof, the centurion, the hemorrhaging woman, all those people were all following him and trusting. And that's, I think, what we're called to do. Okay. I've rabbited and chatted to you. From what you've heard so far, from what you've talked about within your little groups, where do you want to place your energies in this new evangelisation? I'm going to give you another 3-4 minutes to have a little think about, is there something you've heard that has made you maybe surprised you or made you thought differently or thinking, oh, that's a load of rubbish? Have a little think and talk amongst yourselves a bit. Anything you've heard, maybe that's a point at which you want to sort of focus your conversation, but if you want to go somewhere else with that conversation, by all means do. 3 more minutes.
Well, having had children it's having to sometimes step back and find that the child becomes very teenagers. They challenge you. Quite often influenced by friends and others. And they seem to give up. And you can fall easily into the trap of but then nothing stays the same forever, including them and including you. But in my case, with my teenagers, that all changed. And which was the better, when they came, they wanted to come. They went through that and they grew up for themselves and they questioned things for themselves. And it isn't ultimately, we have to accept that we do our best. Our conscience, we're not all responsible for their own. It's the terrible thing in a way that we all have. We go through these different stages. I don't think any of us will have increased on themselves. When you feel I'm losing my own life teaches you that one to the other, not always feeling the glow. That's the norm. Feeling the glow or that's what I think it is. We don't really appreciate it. It's a strange thing. I say it's supernatural. We have earned it.
Now I understand that Father Jonathan Belowski is coming to talk with you tomorrow and explore a bit further with you tomorrow the practicalities of maybe the answer to that particular question. And so I'm going to leave that for tomorrow really, but hopefully you've got something, you're armed now with maybe something you can talk with him about. This is something from the Porta Fide, which I really loved, and we looked at it a couple of years ago when we went to the race course with talking about the new evangelisation. And it says, faith grows when it's lived as an experience of love received and when it's communicated as an experience of joy. And I just wanted to talk to you about joy a minute, or maybe about 3 or 5 minutes actually. We can do all sorts of things and communicate all sorts of things if joy is involved in it. And I'm going to give you sort of 2 metaphors for that, if you like. And they're both by way of a song, so bear with me a minute. But this chap, you can find him on YouTube, he's called Ukulele Boy. And just listen to this a minute. Is imperfect. But what is communicated with such enthusiasm and joy and some skill that the message is put across. So whatever we do by way of evangelisation, if we take a note out of his book maybe, and not worry too much about our imperfections, just do it with enthusiasm and joy and some skill, it will be communicated. The message will come across. Richard Rohr says this about imperfection. Being human means to be imperfect, to be limited and thus to change and travel on a perpetual journey. Mature spirituality gives us the ability to live joyfully in an imperfect world. This is important because the imperfect world is the only one we have. And if God does not love imperfect people, well then God has no one to love. He loves us in the midst of our imperfections. Now, we often think that maybe joy is, and you think, you know, I'm not a comic, I'm not a comedian, I can't do things like that. But here's another metaphor for joy. I'll talk you through it as it begins. It takes a little while to load up. This is a piece of music by Eric Whittaker. It's quite weird, but on webcams across the world, you're seeing a number of places, he gets people to sing parts to this beautiful piece of music that he has written, and he conducts them. Listen to this. I don't know about you, but something's just happened in here. And it's joy. No laughter, no song and dance. But it's the sort of joy that I think the chap we will hear about that walked into church and saw the beauty experienced for the first time in 15 years, he says. So I offer you that as a metaphor for joy. But also, do you know, we work hard to plan mission weeks or work hard to plan something that we hope somebody will be moved by. And sometimes we fail. Or sometimes we think we fail. You know, I work in a school, and sometimes I'm in my little school room doing my bit, and I step out and the kids are being badly behaved, or litter's being dropped, or someone's swearing, dare I say, and I think, oh. But in a sense, I'm one of those little people in the box, singing my part of the kingdom song. And in a sense, we, in all of our efforts, are in our own little square of the kingdom, singing our little bit of the kingdom song in what we're doing. And we're not always aware of what other people are doing. We're not aware of how our efforts come together to make such a beautiful song. These people were not aware of what else was being sung. And that's really like us. We do the best we possibly can, and we trust that it will all come together. So that's all I've got to say. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to talking to you later on.
Well, thank you very much, Jillian. I'm sure you all felt that was really a very engaging and beautiful presentation, and given us lots of things to think about, maybe that a lot of maybe prioritisation, that word that I really didn't think I would do that. It's lovely, and it makes us think a little bit differently about the pressures on us around mission. I think one of the things we've faced is the fear that we've got to go out there and stand on a soapbox and do this, but actually by doing simple things like just loving our neighbour or inviting our senior parishioners to a group tea is part of that. So beautiful, and I love the imagery you put up. Once again, we do have refreshments in the hall, and Jillian's going to join us. I'm sure we'll be happy to talk with people further. So please join us in the hall, and thank you for coming this evening.